And we're back in the car at night, a spooky nighttime episode, not really. But welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Tuesday evening here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. A return to one of my favorite kind of series on the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast, most underrated film performances. Now, this is the kind of concept that not everybody is going to answer the same way. So, for example, an underrated performance can be, let's say, an actor or actress who is not particularly well known or was not particularly well known at the time that knocked a performance out of the park, seemingly out of nowhere. And it sort of was undersold just how great it was, and then not till later years to say, wow, that's how so-and-so became so-and-so. Then there are the underrated performances by people who became stars, but maybe not as big of a star as a certain performance would indicate. And an example of that would be Lou Diamond Phillips. Now, Lou Diamond Phillips has had a pretty good career, but his performance as Richie Valens in La Bamba, I would have as top 5 most unsung great performances. So he got some acclaim, but in my opinion, not nearly enough. But the third type of most underrated performance is when a major talent, an acknowledged GOAT of film acting, whether it's a Meryl Streep, whether it's a Bobby D or Al Pacino or Daniel Day-Lewis or Leonardo DiCaprio, but someone of that exalted status where they are pretty much acknowledged even among people who don't like them. Yes, this is somebody who has mastered the craft of film acting for sure. But even within a great career of enormous amounts of acclaim, Oscar nominations, Oscar wins, huge hit movies, maybe franchises even, there are certain performances which slip into the cracks. In some cases, a film could be or have been a big box office hit, but not enough was made of just how great a particular lead performance is. Tonight, I am going to be talking about Tom Hanks, 2-time Oscar winner, multiple nominee for Best Actor, and a performance he gives in Clint Eastwood's 2016, I guess you could call it a docudrama? I'm not even sure if that's the right word, but it is a dramatic film based on true events, and at least 75% of what we see in the movie happened in real life, pretty much exactly as presented in the film. For the sort of history buffs out there, and there are people who are, let's say, under 25, who may not, even if you're a New Yorker, may not have any clear memories of that incredible night in 2009 where that US Airways flight ended up in the Hudson River. That's basically what the movie Sully is about. It is specifically about the pilot of that ill-fated flight. His name is Chesley Sullenberger, and then as now, and before this near catastrophe, everybody always called him Sully, and that's the character Tom Hanks plays in this film. And another terrific performer who's incredibly versatile, Aaron Eckhart, plays his co-pilot, Jeff Skiles, another real-life person. And the movie kind of blends, feels, or I should say, there are moments where it feels like a documentary. It has the cinema verite feel to it, where you're watching. You have professional actors and people who seem like regular people who could have actually been on the plane, like that sort of thing. And the movie Flight 93, much more grim subject matter, but that was a film I thought did a good job of balancing like real people who were not trained actors with trained actors. And that's something that this movie Sully does really well. Now, in order to make a movie, you have to, even if it's based on a true story, you will often tilt certain true events in a certain way that's not exactly accurate to history, but you're making a movie. And to make, or to bring up another point, a pick a biographical film. For example, one of my favorite films, fictional films based on fact ever, is Milos Forman's 1999 film Man on the Moon, starring Jim Carrey in just an absolutely sensational performance as the real-life, tragic Andy Kaufman. And he even says at the beginning of the movie, a lot of the important events of my life have been mixed up and changed around for dramatic purposes. In the world of Sully, nothing is really changed around, but there are certain moments which are heightened. So basically, for those who don't know the true story, and from a certain point of view, if you walked into this movie, obviously nobody who would be tuning into this kind of podcast, but if you walk into this movie not knowing that the US Airways flight went down and ended up in the Hudson River, if you went into this thinking it was something similar to Denzel in the movie Flight, which is a completely fictional film, but it also deals with a pilot making an unbelievable landing of a craft that probably was going to go down and everyone on board was going to die. This film has elements similar to the movie Flight. Was it Jonathan Demme? But Denzel plays a character called Whip. I think his name, what is it, Whip Hubley? Something like that. Not even sure about that. But if all you know is, okay, Tom Hanks, I feel like I've heard of this movie, but I don't know anything about it. If all you see is a pilot absorbing a bird strike, that the plane absorbs a bird strike, and the engines are ruined, they're not going to be able to make their actual destination. And in fact, this is where the drama in the film comes into play, whereas in real life, I don't think, this is what I was talking about, I don't think that it was as big of a deal as the movie makes out. But again, it's a movie and you have to push the dramatic elements as much as is reasonably possible. In other words, there are questions that would always be asked when a pilot has to ditch an aircraft, whether or not it was warranted. And I feel like the questions are asked in a kind of much harsher way in the world of this movie than in the real hearings that actually did take place. But the plane gets struck by birds. It is a significant bird strike, and the engines are pretty much gone. The air traffic controllers are advising go to Newark, or maybe you could get back to, they don't say MacArthur Airport, but they're trying to figure out somewhere that he can land. And they are indicating that they think that the plane can make it to an actual either airfield or small airport, even if it's an airport that normally would only handle single and double engine planes. It's still better. You're not going to put it down on the Long Island Expressway, for example, or the Deegan. But Chesley Sullenberger, as somebody who has already been in the air for more than 3 decades, I think he's pushing 4 decades, he does not think the plane has more than a couple of minutes. And that if they make an attempt, if they put all their eggs in the basket of actually getting to an airport, they're not going to make it. And they're all going to die. And the way that Tom Hanks comes across in these scenes, you see the deep concern. And Aaron Eckhart as Jeff Skiles, same thing. They're going over the books that explain what to do in certain situations. There are manuals. There are all of these different protocols for these kinds of disasters, because you try to at least give the pilots an opportunity. Well, here's what you're supposed to do. But in the real world of this true story, Chesley Sullenberger only had a couple of seconds to figure out which of my potential decisions has the highest risk and which gives the best chance to save as many souls on board as possible. And he decides, we are going to put down in the Hudson River because I will be able to navigate the bird. And yeah, the water landing, he doesn't say this, but the water landing is going to be hellacious. But this, as one of my friends who used to fly for a living says, these planes are built to take a sustained battering. They are not paper mache airplanes. And what Chesley Sullenberger in the moment was thinking, as much as there is a chance of mortality. There's a chance that some people are going to die. But he feels if he lands correctly, the plane's not going to fall apart when it hits the water. It's not going to react as if it is crashing into land. And so you get the landing gear down, everybody gets their flotation devices, and here we go, water landing. And yes, we learn very early, even if we don't know the history, everybody gets off the boat, so to speak. They call it a boat. Everybody gets off the plane. The film then becomes a matter of, did Chesley Sullenberger really have to put down in the Hudson River? And then there's a whole insurance angle, and he kind of screwed the pooch, and that's where you have the hearings. But the way that Tom Hanks, without doing a full-on impersonation of the real Chesley Sullenberger, there's actually a great moment on, I don't know if it was Conan O'Brien or Jimmy Fallon, but it was on one of those late night shows. I think that Letterman was already retired, because Tom Hanks and Letterman had he used to go on the show frequently. Anytime he had a movie, it was like a thing that he would always go on with Dave. But there's a moment where Chesley Sullenberger, it seemed that he genuinely surprised Tom Hanks not long after the movie came out. He didn't know he was going to be there. He doesn't impersonate him so much as he seems to inhabit the spirit and what this guy would have been like at this time. He has absolute conviction that he did the right thing. And it doesn't matter who says, Captain Sullenberger, you messed up. The engines could have made it. He is steadfast. We could not. And this is all of my years of flying. And of course we can tell it's Tom Hanks, even with the mustache and with the gray hair. But he moves differently, and the cadence of his speech is not what it usually is. He tried to mirror the, not really peculiar, but it's a distinctive speech pattern. If you listen to the real Chesley Sullenberger, the way he pauses, the way he breathes when he speaks, it's something that I wouldn't have picked up on necessarily unless this was a real person, which it is. And so it turns into a series of kind of hearings. The FAA and other government agencies, and the company that built the plane, I don't know if it's Boeing, I'm not sure about that, but they want this, it's not a trial. Sullenberger could theoretically lose his wings, but not going to jail because nobody died. It was a question of, did he make the right decision, or did he panic, and did he fuck up? And so there are a lot of these moments where you see people do simulations of, being in the cockpit and trying to mirror the actual real life scenario that Chesley Sullenberger and Jeff Skiles faced. But what they don't factor in is the so-called human factor. And a moment where Tom Hanks in the film explains what he means by the human factor, and that there are certain things that the computer can't mimic, the computer can't know, and it can't really allow for. And these are moments of incredible power from Tom Hanks, who never raises his voice. Chesley Sullenberger was not a yeller. He was not a broad personality. I mean, he's still alive, but he was known as a guy who never lost his cool. And in the kind of frantic moments on the aircraft, because the movie kind of comes back to the moments on the aircraft, we see a lot of it, but we don't see it all in one straight shot until the very end. But what we get is that Chesley Sullenberger never panicked. It was just a question of math and him trusting his own judgment above whatever the book says to do, or whatever the FAA in the hearing, or whatever the air traffic controllers, who all have the best of intentions. And there's even a kind of mildly amusing, humorous bit with one of the air traffic controllers who thinks that he fucked up and that he let this plane go down. And then when he finds out that they're alive, it's actually a pretty cool moment in the world of the film. We get to know Chesley Sullenberger in the scenes in New York City where he's kind of sequestered. It's really unfair, and this was based on truth, but I don't think that it was quite as dire as the movie kind of portrays. And also, to be clear, everyone in New York City, everybody around, saw him as a hero immediately, and whatever nonsense was going on where they were having these hearings, it's not like public opinion shifted against him. That didn't happen. It doesn't happen in the world of the film. And I believe Patton Oswalt plays is it him? I think he plays a bartender in the movie. If it's not him, I don't know where I came up with that. I apologize. But there are everybody that he encounters. There are random people just coming up to him and hugging him. My father was on that plane, Captain. He owes you his life. There is a lot of that, and Tom Hanks handles those scenes as you would imagine the real Chesley Sullenberger. This is not a showy performance. And the reality is that the movies that he won his Oscars for, which I love, Philadelphia and Forrest Gump, those are bigger, more show-stopping moments within the world of the film where he can emote. And obviously Forrest Gump, he has moments of incredible emotion, and Philadelphia playing the kind of doomed character of Andrew Beckett. But the tightness and the interiority and the way that we feel like we get this guy because of what Hanks does with his eyes, his body language. And Clint Eastwood has always been known as an actor's director. He is somebody that doesn't do very many takes, but there are very few actors who had and have had issues with him from the directorial perspective, because he lets actors do their thing. He doesn't want to keep people, on set any longer than they have to, but he knows how to elicit as much from anyone as they can. And Tom Hanks does a pretty good Clint Eastwood impersonation. He's, joked about the fact that Clint is the only director that he's worked with, and this is a little bit quaint. He says Clint doesn't really say the word action, or at least he never said it on a scene. Maybe when, some of the scenes with, forgot the actress who plays his wife. Funny, I can't even remember her name. Clint worked with Laura Linney. I'm sorry. Laura Linney played the real life wife, of course, of Chesley Sullenberger. But Tom Hanks says something to the effect of maybe he says the word action with other people, but with me on set, we would be ready to go, and everyone was in position, and Clint would just very quietly say, begin. And that's it. He didn't say action. He didn't make a grand thing of it. And if somebody didn't immediately jump into action when he said the word begin, well, they could always edit out the first couple of seconds. But Tom, in his appearances discussing the film, he almost was giving himself the short shrift by giving all the praise to Chesley Sullenberger. Yes, he deserves all the praise for rescuing all of those people, including himself. They all would have died if they had attempted to get to Newark. And this is another thing in the kind of recreations during the hearings that we see. Every other permutation results in a negative outcome. In this case, meaning everybody's going to die. And the film sets certain government guys, quote unquote, it sets certain people up as kind of in a villainous mode, but they're not villains. They're just asking really tough questions, which, in my opinion, shouldn't have been asked in the first place. But when something like this happens and the aircraft itself is unsalvageable, I understand. In the immortal words of Paul Reiser in the movie Aliens, this installation has a substantial dollar value. And if there's any way that they can somehow get a bird rebuilt on someone else's dime by coming up with some kind of bullshit in one of these hearings, they're going to try. But at a certain point in time, they realize we don't have an angle here. And the moment that I referenced where Tom Hanks lays it out, it's something, he says words to the effect of, can we be serious now? And it's as close as he comes to getting angry in the world of this film, because they've listened to a lot of stuff, a lot of hocus pocus, and a lot of things that have nothing to do with two people, in this case, Chesley Sullenberger and Jeff Skiles, two people in charge of an aircraft with all of those souls counting on them to do the right thing, to try to rescue all of their lives. It's not anything that you get out of a book or a computer or a recreation. And the way he delivers those lines, I mean, he could have won. He could have gotten another Best Actor Oscar. It would not have been out of place. And the movie Sully, before I forget, it is streaming on Max as we speak. If you happen to get Max, you don't have to pay the $2. And to be fair, this is a film that got broad critical acclaim. It's 85% on Rotten Tomatoes. I just feel like Tom Hanks has been so good in so many different movies, whether it's, I recently talked about his smashing performance in Road to Perdition and how incredible he is opposite Leonardo DiCaprio in a supporting role in Catch Me If You Can. But he is so good. He is such a vibrant talent that we can take him for granted. And I feel like in an entire career as a leading man, going back to films like Big, even Nothing in Common with the late, great Jackie Gleason, his most slept on Hall of Fame all-time performance is his turn as Chesley Sullenberger in the movie Sully, which, as I say, didn't cost a ton to make. As always, Clint Eastwood brought the movie in. What? What did he do? What did he bring the movie in? He brought it in on time and under budget. And it was a significant box office hit, but people slept on just how great the lead performance was, particularly in the final third. As, again, if you don't know the real story, it kind of seems like he's going to get fucked. The system is going to chew him up, and this is unfair. Or maybe he really did mess up. Maybe there's something to the information that the computer is spitting out saying, well, we think that he possibly panicked. But the performance by Tom is riveting from beginning to end, whether he's during these hearings, whether he's at the hotel, whether he's just jogging on the street with Jeff Skiles. And as I say, I love Aaron Eckhart's performance as Skiles. It is just a great performance. And even seeing him, there were certain sequences in the film that had to be very difficult to film, where all of the actors are in standing water on the aircraft. I mean, there had to be about a month's worth of shooting where everybody was exceedingly uncomfortable, cold 100% of the time. It is never easy to shoot in water. Ask James Cameron. But it is never easy to shoot in water. And Hanks even registers a little bit of the being uncomfortable because he's freezing. It was a cold day. It was winter. I think it was January. It could have been colder. They kind of got a little bit lucky, but people could have frozen to death. There are so many things that could have gone wrong, and everything in real life, spoiler alert, turned out right. And this movie is a fantastic representation of that miracle on the Hudson. That's what it was called at the time. It's still what it's called. And if the film had not focused mostly on Chesley Sullenberger, if you were making a movie about the near tragedy averted, you would just call the film The Miracle on the Hudson. But Tom Hanks is the key. He is the MVP, and it is certainly, in my opinion, a top 5 best performance that Tom Hanks has ever given in a movie. And when you look at his career, that is really high praise indeed. Tom Hanks in Clint Eastwood's 2016 film Sully, the newest entry in our continuing series of most underrated film performances. This has been episode 472 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Tuesday evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, peace.